Hello and welcome to Lost in Sci-Fi and Fantasy. I'm your host Leo, and today we are talking about the original King Kong from 1933. Now, I've been very curious about watching this film for quite a long time because I really do enjoy old monster movies, and this is one of the earliest ones, and it's always piqued my interest, especially since, I'm a Godzilla fan, and I haven't watched the original King Kong. I also haven't watched Godzilla vs. Kong, the original Godzilla vs. Kong. And now that I've watched the original King Kong, and I've of course seen the original Godzilla, I can watch that with a little bit more context. Not much, because of course, in their respective films, they die at the end, so there doesn't really need to be any context at that point, but hey. But yes, this was the first time of me actually watching this version of King Kong. I had seen the 2005 Peter Jackson King Kong, which is a very, very long film, and a bit of a hard watch. And I actually might have seen this film back then, but I don't remember it. It's very possible, because there was a period of time where, like, when a remake of a film was coming out, my mom would have us watch the original of the film and then the remake. For example, when the Brendan Fraser Journey to the Center of the Earth came out, we watched the original Journey to the Center of the Earth and then the Brendan Fraser one. So there's a decent-ish chance that when this came out, or when the 2005 Peter Jackson film came out, there's a chance that I saw this, but, I was too young to even register what was going on. And kind of, fair enough. It's a bit of a slow-ish build, kind of. That's pretty much the extent of my history with this film. I've seen a lot of King Kong media. I've seen the most recent stuff, the MonsterVerse stuff. I've seen the Peter Jackson film. And I've looked into the history of King Kong a bit, but not actually watched the older movies. For example, I hadn't seen up to this point the original King Kong. I hadn't seen its direct sequel, which we'll talk about briefly later. And I haven't seen the 70s remake. But, yeah, I really like Skull Island, which is kind of the most modern version of a King Kong film, except for they don't try to bring Kong back. That kind of thing. But yeah, we might talk about that at some point down the line. But keeping that kind of compartmentalized off on its own thing, we can kind of start trying to dive into the story of this King Kong. Now, it opens with an acting producer or stage producer coming to a ship that is getting ready to set sail. And we meet the director, whose name is Carl Denham, and he is trying to find an actress. Now, he is a famous director, famed for going out and shooting pictures of, actual, nature and shit. Going out into a jungle and finding a tiger. Going into the Sahara and, filming snakes and shit. That kind of thing. Find a lion, shoot a lion, film a charging rhino, that kind of thing. And he's ready to go on potentially his biggest journey ever. But there is one thing holding him back. And that is he needs an actress. Now, he doesn't want to take an actress, and none of the producers or stage managers or whatever want to give him an actress. So desperate, he goes to find one himself. And he looks at a woman's house, which is it's like a homeless shelter for women at first. And before he even decides to go talk to any of them, he's like, nah. And he goes to a fruit stand where a woman is contemplating stealing a piece of fruit. The vendor gets all snippy with her. Denham pays off the guy and pretty much kidnaps her, takes her to a diner and asks her if she wants to be in a movie. And she's like, And he's like, no, you don't have to sleep with me. This is all above board. I just need an actress to go on an adventure and whatnot, and we'll get things done. And she's like, oh, okay. So they go and set sail. And she is up on the deck while the crewmen, which there's an unusual number of crewmen, are running around getting things ready. And she meets John Driscoll, or just John, who is the kind of like first mate guy on the ship. And at first he's very annoyed with her, but he is vaguely attracted to her. She's definitely attracted to him, but he's trying to kind of keep distance from her. Then they do some test shots and whatnot, and then they reach the location of, at least a location, where the director is more willing to actually let them know where they're going and what they're looking for. And he tells them of a guy who came across some people and was able to pinpoint around the location that they came from, and used that to create a map, and then gave the map to Denham, because they're like, oh, you'll probably be interested in this, here you go. So they make their way to the island, and they find it after wading through some fog for a bit. But they do find the island and go ashore, where they see a ritual is being performed by the native people. Now, this island is separated in a bit of a weird way. So they don't really ever refer to it as Skull Island. It's the island with Skull Mountain on it. But it does, from this point on, kind of be referred to in the movies and whatnot as Skull Island. And it's separated. There's like a little peninsula at the bottom of the island that is walled off. And there's a big to-do about, like, ooh, who built the wall and whatnot. And it's like... Like, the running theory that Denham proposes is that an advanced civilization built the wall, and it was probably the people that live on the other side of the wall, but they just kind of forgot and went back to being like a tribal people. At least is kind of what he's implying. It's very weird, but yeah, on this peninsula, there's the village, a wall, and then the rest of the island. And they come across a ritual that's going on where they seem to be, decorating a woman and performing a dance. Denham tries to get a shot of this ritual happening because, it's like, ooh, daylight and whatnot. Let's see if I can get a shot before they notice that we're here. And instead of like trying to continue hiding in the bush and whatnot with the camera and sneakily, get some shots, like some snapshots of it, he sets up the camera in the middle of the fucking road and then just starts slowly, like, okay, I need to adjust the height a little bit, turn it a little bit this way, turn it like a little bit that way. He's like trying to get the perfect shot. Well, the chief spots him and is like, oi, what the fuck? Stops the whole ritual and whatnot. Everyone just starts standing still as the native people come to him, and they have a conversation because the ship captain can understand what they're saying, and they have a conversation where they're like, yeah, dude, you kind of fucked our entire ritual, but we see that you have a pretty lady with you. She would make the perfect sacrifice, or bride of Kong. We'll give you, I think it's like 5 of our women for her. And then they're like, no thank you, but we'll be back tomorrow to make friends and see about trying to get this filmed. So they leave, and in the night, after John and Anne declare their love for each other and have a little bit of a makeout session, John goes to talk with the captain and Denham to figure out a plan for tomorrow, when Anne is silently kidnapped by the native people somehow, they somehow come along the ship quietly, are able to climb the side of the ship quietly, just so happen to come across her, like, exactly where she's standing. Like, they come up exactly where she is. They nab her and are able to keep her quiet enough and silently slip her over the edge, while across the other side of the ship, there's a guy sitting there that's supposed to be on watch, I guess, and just nothing. She gets dragged away, taken to the island, and made the bride of Kong. By the time anyone notices what's going on the boat, like they hear, like, oh wow, the people on the island are kind of getting a bit rowdy, wonder what's happening. John goes to look for Anne, notices she's missing, goes to her room, she's not there, and the cook of the ship notices that there's a bracelet or something, or a necklace that's on the ship, and notices that Anne was almost certainly taken and starts to raise alarm. Everyone searches the ship, notices she's gone, so they all moved onto the island to just in time to see her get taken by Kong, essentially. Like, Kong is walking away with her as they get to the gate. A party then goes to try and rescue her, while the rest stay behind to guard the gate to make sure it stays open. And the chase is on. So the party runs into a stegosaurus, gas it, but the gas doesn't really do enough. Then they try to shoot it, but seemingly the dinosaur still kind of lives. Then they come across a swamp and spend some time building a raft. They build the raft, float along, get attacked by a brachiosaurus that is I guess a carnivorous brachiosaurus, and they get chased by that for a bit. Then a group of people are able to kind of still stay on Kong's track, follow it to a log, where Kong sets Anne on a log, or like on a dead tree, goes back and starts like shaking the log, trying to get them off. And it's like a good 2-3 minute scene of Kong shaking the log, people falling to their death, and you watch as they land and die. It's very funny because they're like little rag dolls. But John is able to keep safe by climbing down the cliff partially and sitting in a cave. And he's able to kind of fend off Kong and a proto skull crawler. It just kind of... It has a very short scene where it just is kind of crawling up a vine, and he cuts the vine and it falls. And then he kind of fends off Kong with a knife. But then Anne gets attacked, kind of, by a dinosaur, like a T-Rex thing, but at least in the 2005 version, it's a V-Rex. Kong goes, fights the dinosaur, wins, accidentally knocks over the tree with Anne in it, but she's fine. He then picks up Anne and goes. John picks up the trail and follows. Kong goes to a cave. There, sets Anne down, fights a snake as John arrives. Then takes Anne outside, where she's attacked by a pterodactyl. Kong fights a pterodactyl. And this is when John and Anne are able to kind of slip away. They book it, make it back to the village, where Kong attacks the village. They're able to make it back to the boats, and they then knock Kong out with a gas grenade. They take Kong back to New York somehow. They don't explain how they did that, but they did. And in New York, they're showing Kong off as the eighth wonder of the world and whatnot. They're like, people spent $20 on a ticket for this film, which for the time, in today's money, is around $400 per ticket, which is insane for what people going in were assuming was a movie. But he goes in, or they go in, and no, it's not a movie. It's actually more of a showcase. They brought back something. And boom, they show off Kong. And while pictures are being taken, and it's announced that Anne's going to marry John and whatnot, Kong freaks out and is able to break free from his restraints and goes on a rampage on the city, hunting down Anne. He eventually does get Anne and starts still continuing his rampage around the city until John and Carl Denham suggest maybe planes would work. And Kong climbs the Empire State Building. The planes come, shoot Kong down. It's a long scene of planes flying around, shooting Kong as Kong slowly but surely gets weaker. And then Kong falls, and the policeman tells Denham, the planes finally got him. And Carl's like, no, the planes didn't get him. It was beauty that killed the beast. And then the movie ends. Now, that seems to be the overarching theme of the film. Like, it opens up with a text screen of supposedly a quote from, like, an old Arabian proverb, which is essentially that after a man falls in love, like, after a beast falls in love with a woman, they are as good as dead, essentially. And it is kind of restated by Denham at the beginning of the film, or near the beginning of the film, when he's talking to John, saying, like, you shouldn't fall in love with her, because I know you to be a good, strong man, etc. But the minute you fall in love, a strong man will become weak and easier to kill. And he uses some kind of weird thing, like, a beast is terrifying and vicious and whatnot, but once the beast becomes tamed by a woman, the beast is then able to be killed by the now more ferocious, though still weaker than it. But since it has been softened by love, it is easier to kill. And I guess that's the implication that he's trying to get at, is that because Kong fell in love with Anne, Kong became weaker. It's a bit silly, but yeah. The special effects are actually kind of interesting. You can kind of see how they did some of the techniques of, like, I'm pretty sure they used, like, rear projection on a lot of scenes where or potentially even just, like, normal projection, where they have, like, a border of, like, foliage and whatnot up against a screen. And with rear projection, they project it from behind the screen onto it to try to get it as clear as possible without any kind of, like, potential, like, projecting onto the actors and whatnot. And then that's the kind of stuff that they're reacting to and whatnot is the thing on the screen. And I believe that's the main thing that they used for, like, the Stegosaurus fight. It's partially some of the things that they used with Kong. But, yeah, they did that. Then there's also a scene where they're walking alongside the Stegosaurus. And it's very obvious that they're like standing next to a screen, slowly walking next to it, which is silly but quite funny. Another set of the special effects that I found quite interesting was during Kong's rampage through the city. There's a really good scene where he's pretty much attacking a rail line, like a raised rail line, and he's just slowly ripping it apart until the train comes. Then he beats on the train, and then he gets a bit bored, and then climbs a building. But that entire sequence is kind of interesting to see as he's slowly ripping it apart, and it's all like stop motion and whatnot, and it works really well. Now, this film does have a direct sequel, a very fast turned around direct sequel. So this film came out in 1933, and its sequel, Son of Kong, came out in 1933. Specifically, this movie came out April 7th, 1933, and later that same year, December 22nd, they came out with a sequel. And they actually got a few of the actors back for this film. They got the director, Carl Denham, played by Robert Armstrong, to come back. According to this description, after his disastrous venture with the giant ape King Kong, promoter Carl Denham flees New York to avoid indictment from a grand jury. He sails off with friend Captain Engelhorn, who is also returning, and soon gets involved with singer Helen Peterson. When a crooked sea captain kills Helen's father, she stows away aboard Denham's boat, which heads to Kong's home on Skull Island. There, the group befriends Kong's son, who defends them against the resident dinosaurs. So this film is a lot shorter. So the original King Kong was about an hour and a half, give or take. Maybe, I think it was actually about an hour and 45 minutes, something like that. This movie is only an hour and 10. Like, it's not even long enough to classify as a feature-length film nowadays. Nowadays, in order to be a feature-length film, you have to be 90 minutes, which is an hour and a half. This one's only an hour and 10. But yeah, it's interesting. They got the actor who played the native chief back, and they got the actor that played the cook back. So I find that quite interesting. But other than that, yeah, I will probably do Son of Kong at some point. There's other Kong films that I am trying to see what they are. I don't know if any of them will be able to be watched, because a lot of them are old and usually forgotten. So there's King Kong, Son of Kong, then King Kong vs. Godzilla, King Kong Escapes, which is a Japanese King Kong film directed by Ishiro Honda, the director of Godzilla, which introduces a mecha King Kong. Hell yeah. Then there's the 70s King Kong remake. Then King Kong Lives, which I guess is a direct sequel to that King Kong. Then the 2005 King Kong, Kong Skull Island, Godzilla vs. Kong, and Godzilla X Kong New Empire. Then The Mighty Kong, which is an animated movie, and Kong King of Atlantis, and Kong Return to the Jungle. Then some TV shows, The King Kong Show, Kong the Animated Series, Kong King of the Apes, and Skull Island, the most recent animated series on Netflix. What's the Kong King of the Apes one? Is that part of the thing? It might be. But yeah, I'll probably see about picking through some of these things. I don't know how easy it would be to get my hands on King Kong Escapes. I kind of really want it, though. So I'll need to figure that out. I don't know about the 70s or 80s King Kong films. It's kind of at this moment as to whether or not I'll be willing to. We'll see. We'll see. Because it's obviously a very different series of films. Though they have a bit of an interesting history, so maybe. Maybe. Anywho, I think we'll go ahead and leave it there before I start just digging into a deeper Kong hole than I would like to at this moment. But yes, with that said, we'll go ahead and leave it there. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you guys are listening/watching on YouTube, feel free to give it a like, comment, and subscribe. Or if you are just listening on any podcast catcher of your choice, feel free to rate, review, and share it with your friends. But with that said, once again, thank you guys so much for listening. I will talk to you guys next week. Goodbye.